When I bought a new car, my neighbor smashed my headlights, filed daily noise complaints, and got my license suspended, then smirked. If you can afford that car, you can afford tickets. But at 3 a.m., I caught him creeping up with a brick, and I waited silently behind the bushes with my camera. I was crouched behind the bushes at 3 a.m., holding my phone so tight my hand shook. The screen was already recording. My neighbor, Mark, stood in the glow of my driveway light with a brick in his hand, shifting his weight like he was trying to pick the perfect angle to swing. He didn't know I was there. He didn't know I'd been waiting for him for weeks. What he did know was that I'd finally stopped ignoring him, and he hated that. A month earlier, when I'd bought my car, a deep blue 2022 Toyota Supra, the first real thing I'd ever splurged on, Mark walked straight into my driveway, nodded at it like he was judging a dog at a shelter, and said, "Must be nice. Hope you can afford everything that comes with it." I thought he was just being weird. Mark was always a little off. Always watching, always listening, always outside working on something that never seemed to get done. I brushed it off. The next morning, my headlights were smashed. 2 days later, he filed a noise complaint at 2 in the afternoon when I was literally on a Zoom call. Then another. And another. Within 10 days, the city flagged my address. A week after that, I got a notice in the mail saying my license was suspended for repeated noncompliance and negligent operation. Mark watched from his porch while I read it. He sipped his iced tea like he was enjoying a show. When our eyes met, he gave me that smug little grin and said, "If you can afford that car, you can afford tickets." That was the moment something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, solid way that doesn't come undone. I stopped reacting. I stopped arguing. I stopped complaining to the city. Instead, I installed cameras, real ones, hidden ones, ones he couldn't spot even if he tried. And I waited. The weirdest part was how easily he escalated after that. Like he could sense that my silence meant something he didn't like. He started walking past my house slower. Started leaving garbage bags near my mailbox. Started revving his truck outside my window at random hours, probably to bait me into losing my temper. But I didn't. I waited. And tonight, it finally happened. Mark stepped closer to my car, turning the brick in his hand like he was checking its weight. His jaw was set. He wasn't nervous. He'd done this before. He was so relaxed that for a second I wondered how many times he'd attacked my property without me ever knowing. The cold air made my breath visible. I tucked myself deeper behind the bushes. My phone caught every detail, the brick, the angle, the shadow he cast over the hood of my car. He raised his arm. I stared at him, and all I could think was, this is it, this is where everything changes. This is where I finally get him. But then something strange happened. Something that didn't fit the pattern. Before he swung, Mark stepped back, pulled something from his pocket, and looked at it for a long moment. His face lit by whatever was on that screen. Whatever he saw made him smile, not the smug porch smile, something colder, almost satisfied. Then he whispered something too soft for me to catch and tightened his grip on the brick again. My stomach dropped. Because suddenly I realized this wasn't just about a car. This was something else, something bigger, something he'd planned. And right as he lifted the brick over his head, I saw what was on his phone. And that's when I knew I wasn't the only one he'd been targeting. I didn't always hate Mark. In fact, when I first moved to Tacoma 2 years ago, he was the first neighbor to walk over and introduce himself. He seemed normal enough, mid-50s, divorced, always wearing that faded Seahawks cap that looked grafted to his skull. He told me his last tenants weren't cut out for the neighborhood, but said it politely enough that I didn't read much into it. I should have. At the time, I'd just gotten a promotion at my IT job. I was finally making enough to live alone without roommates, and buying that little blue house felt like the first real adult milestone I'd earned. I was proud of it. I took care of the yard, paid my bills on time, kept to myself. No drama. Mark liked to hang around my driveway while I worked on small projects. He always had some advice or story about how he used to fix cars or how he knew people at City Code. I thought he was just chatty, but looking back, there were hints. Like how he'd ask weirdly personal questions, how much I made when I worked, whether I traveled for my job, or how he once joked, "A place like this attracts attention if you don't watch it." I laughed it off, but the way he said it stuck with me. Then there was the package incident. About a year after I moved in, I ordered a gaming monitor, Nothing special, but I'd saved for it. FedEx marked it delivered, but it never showed. 2 days later, I saw Mark's garage open while he was rummaging around inside, and my exact monitor box was sitting behind his tool cabinet. I froze, but before I could say anything, he turned, saw me, and casually closed the garage door like he wasn't hiding anything. I told myself I'd imagined it. I didn't want conflict. I didn't know then how much he thrived on people not wanting conflict. After that, little things kept happening: trash blown onto my lawn, mail mixed up, weird knocks on my door at random hours. None of it was big enough to confront him over without seeming paranoid, but enough to make me uneasy. I started parking my old Civic closer to the house. I even considered moving. But then things quieted down for a while. Or maybe I just got used to the weirdness. Either way, I let my guard down. The day I bought the Supra was the first really good day I'd had in a long time. I'd been saving for that car since college. I picked it up from the dealership, drove it home with the windows down, and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes just staring at it like an idiot. I felt like I'd achieved something, like life was finally lining up. Then Mark walked over, looked at it like it offended him, and made that comment, "Hope you can afford everything that comes with it." I brushed it off as jealousy. Tacoma isn't cheap, and Mark hadn't worked in years. I figured he was resentful or insecure. I had no idea how fast things would start going downhill. When I found my headlights smashed the next morning, the first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Like maybe it was random. Maybe a kid did it. Maybe a rock fell. Anything except what it really was. But then the noise complaints started. The city rep told me someone had filed multiple reports claiming I blasted music all day and night. I barely played music at all. And when the complaints kept coming, each one more detailed than the last, it became obvious someone was trying to build a record. Only one person hated me enough. Still, I thought I could reason with him. Or that it would blow over. I didn't understand who I was dealing with, not yet. And I definitely didn't understand the real reason he targeted me. Not until I saw his phone screen at 3 a.m. After the third noise complaint, I stopped pretending it wasn't Mark. The timing alone gave him away. 2 of the reports were filed on days I wasn't even home. I'd been in Seattle visiting my sister. But the city doesn't verify that before logging violations. They just stack them. And the more that pile grows, the more you look like the problem. Still, I tried to handle things the normal way. I called the city, explained everything, asked for an inspection or at least a conversation. The person on the phone sounded apologetic but told me, once a complaint pattern is flagged, it's hard to overturn unless there's counter-evidence. Counter-evidence. That stuck with me. Because that's when I realized Mark had been planning this. Not reacting. Planning. Around that same time, other things started happening, small, needling annoyances that were too perfectly timed to be coincidences. My trash cans would get knocked over on the nights I put them out early for work. My mail would arrive already opened. Someone scratched jerk into the dirt on my back window. Stupid stuff, but it built up. One night, after another, anonymous complaint that I was revving my engine at 1 a.m. I walked outside to see Mark leaning on his porch railing, watching me like he was waiting for me to explode. Like my anger was the payoff. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I went back inside. But that didn't stop the escalation. The big moment, the one that officially pushed everything into war territory, came 2 weeks before the 3M brick incident. I walked out to my driveway and found a parking ticket on my windshield. I didn't park illegally. I wasn't even on the street. But the violation said blocking sidewalk, which wasn't true. I took photos and planned to fight it. 3 days later, I got another. Then another. All for things I didn't do. When the letter came from the DMV saying my license was suspended due to multiple infractions, I felt my stomach fall through the floor. I hadn't heard Mark walk up behind me until he spoke. "Tough break," he said, sipping from a plastic cup. "Some folks just aren't cut out for keeping up with the rules around here." It wasn't even what he said. It was the tone. The casual, knowing drawl, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. I wanted to confront him, wanted to scream at him, wanted to grab the cup out of his hand and throw it across the street. But instead I heard myself say, "Yeah. Tough break." His smile twitched. Confusion. He wasn't expecting calm, he was expecting fire. That's when I stopped talking altogether. When I started letting him think he'd won. He kept poking, kept testing me. He'd accidentally blow leaves into my yard when he used his leaf blower. He'd stand near the property line and talk loudly about certain people who don't belong in nice neighborhoods. He even followed me to the mailbox one day, humming, just humming, like he wanted me to notice. I pretended I didn't. Inside, though, something was building. Not rage, not fear, something colder, something patient. That patience paid off when one of my old outdoor cameras, one I'd forgotten I even had, caught him sneaking into my driveway at midnight, crouching near my car, then walking away quickly when a motion light turned on. He'd done it before, I knew that now. That's when the idea formed: stop reacting, start watching. I bought new cameras, hid them better, started a log of everything he did, every noise he made, every time he came out of his house when I came home from work. I recorded the revving, the trash, the weird little territorial behaviors. And the whole time, he had no idea I was preparing for him. But even I wasn't prepared for what I saw on his phone that night with the brick. I thought I knew why he hated me: jealousy, boredom, bitterness. I was wrong. What I saw in his hand at 3 a.m. connected dots I didn't even know existed. And it made everything make sense in the worst possible way. The moment I saw the screen on Mark's phone, everything inside me went cold. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a photo. It wasn't even anything to do with me, at least not directly. It was a live feed, a camera feed. From inside my house. For a second, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was my living room, dark except for the faint glow of the router. The angle was from up high, near the back corner, somewhere you wouldn't naturally look. I blinked hard, thinking maybe it was a reflection or a trick of light. Then Mark tapped the screen and zoomed in. He was checking if I was awake. I froze behind the bushes. My heart pounded so loud I was terrified he'd hear it. He stood there casually, like some psycho checking his doorbell cam. His face was calm, almost satisfied. That's when it hit me. He hadn't just been messing with my car or my mail or filing noise complaints. He'd been watching me. For months, maybe longer. My mind reeled back over everything, every weird coincidence, every time he seemed to know I was home, every time he just happened to be outside, every random knock at midnight. Every time I thought I was being paranoid. I wasn't paranoid. I was being surveilled. While I was still processing, Mark lowered the brick and stepped closer to my front window, peering inside like he owned the place. I dug my fingers into the dirt to keep from standing up and lunging at him. I needed him to incriminate himself fully. I needed evidence. I needed him to show the camera where the feed was coming from, and I got exactly that. Mark lifted the phone again and tapped another icon. The screen switched to a new camera. My bedroom. The angle was even higher, almost directly from the corner near the ceiling. It showed my bed, my desk, my laundry hamper. The timestamp said live. He'd been watching me sleep. My brain flashed through the last few weeks, how I kept waking up with this weird sense that something was off. How twice I could have sworn something in my room was moved. How once my bedroom window, a second-story window, was cracked open an inch even though I never opened it. My stomach twisted so hard I almost threw up. He knew my schedule, my habits, when I was home, when I wasn't. When my lights went out. He knew when I left early for work, when I showered. He knew everything. And while I sat frozen, Mark lifted the brick again, pausing like he was deciding whether to hit the headlight or the side mirror first. But he didn't swing. Instead, he whispered, soft but clear enough that my hidden mic picked it up. "Let's see if you finally break tonight." Break. Like he'd been waiting for me to snap, like he wanted me to come outside. Like this, tonight, was some final move in a game I didn't even know I'd been playing. Then he stepped backward and pulled up one more camera angle, one I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't inside my house. It was pointed at my sister's driveway in Seattle. The same sister I visited twice a month. The same sister who had 2 little kids. The same sister whose street was quiet enough that someone could sit in a car and watch her place without anyone noticing. My entire body went numb. He wasn't just targeting me, he was expanding. Whatever this was, whatever sick power trip he was on, it wasn't jealousy. It wasn't petty. It wasn't neighborhood drama. It was calculated and obsessive. And it wasn't just about ruining my life. It was about controlling it. Completely. That was the night I realized Mark didn't just want me gone. He wanted ownership. And he thought he already had it. When Mark switched to the camera feed of my sister's driveway, something inside me snapped into place. Not with panic, not with rage, but with this icy, controlled clarity I'd never felt before. It was like my brain stopped being scared and started calculating. Every part of me that had been passive, irritated, exhausted, gone, replaced by something steady. I stayed behind the bushes until Mark finally lowered the brick, looked one last time through my window, and walked back toward his house. He didn't rush, he didn't hide. He moved with the confidence of someone who believed he couldn't be touched. That was his mistake. The second he closed his door, I slipped into my house, locked everything, and went straight to the living room. I turned on every light so the hidden camera inside could see me clearly. I wanted the recording to show my reaction: shock, fear, awareness. I wanted proof that I discovered the surveillance tonight. Then I grabbed a ladder. My hands shook as I climbed up to each corner of the ceiling. The cameras weren't hard to find once I knew where to look. Tiny black dots drilled into the drywall, disguised as cheap smoke detectors or motion sensors. He must have installed them when he helped me fix my thermostat last year, the one time I'd let him inside without thinking twice. I ripped down 3 cameras. There were more. I found 5 by 4M. My skin crawled the whole time. Every time I reached up, I felt violated all over again. The worst part wasn't even the invasion. It was knowing he'd been watching me without ever needing to sneak in again. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't freak out. I planned. First step, documentation. I took photos of every hole in the wall, every removed device, every angle that proved they were installed intentionally. I made a timeline, a folder, a spreadsheet. I didn't know yet if I'd go legal or go personal, but either way, I needed evidence he couldn't argue with. Second step, digital trail. I screen recorded the footage from my cams, the brick, the phone, the live feeds. I saved everything twice, cloud and external drive. If Mark tried anything, I wasn't losing it. Third step, make him comfortable. If he thought his little surveillance trick was still hidden, he'd slip up. So I left 2 of the cameras in place. Not active, they were disconnected, but physically still there so he wouldn't know I knew. Fourth step, find out what he wanted. People like Mark don't escalate without a payoff. He wasn't vandalizing for fun or spying for curiosity. He had a goal. He had a reason, and that reason was going to tell me exactly how to break him. By the time the sun came up, I had a full plan. Not revenge, not yet. Strategy. I did normal things that morning, took a shower, brewed coffee, walked outside to grab the mail, because I knew Mark would be watching through whatever feeds he still had access to. I wanted him to think he was still in control. But the moment I saw him standing on his porch, arms crossed, staring at me like he was testing my fragility, something else clicked. He wasn't just obsessed. He was waiting for a specific reaction, waiting for me to reach some emotional threshold he'd been nudging me toward. And if he wanted a reaction, if he wanted a breaking point, if he wanted a meltdown, he was going to get the opposite. Cold, silent, controlled. Because while he believed he was studying me, I was finally studying him back. That night, I set my own trap. A real one. A camera pointing directly at where he always stood when he watched my driveway. Another one across the street recording his porch. And one last one near my fence line with a mic so sensitive it could pick up a whisper. I was done being prey. But the twist, the thing I didn't expect, came the next day when I finally dug deeper into his pattern and discovered that Mark had pulled this same thing before. To someone else. Someone who didn't make it out as clean as I still had the chance to. I found the first hint by accident. I was digging through old neighborhood forum posts, public ones anyone could see, trying to figure out if anyone had ever complained about Mark before. I didn't expect much. Guys like him don't usually leave public footprints. They work quietly in shadows behind fences. But then I searched the street name, and a post from 3 years ago popped up. It wasn't even dramatic. Just a short, sad message from someone named Laura W., saying she was leaving Tacoma for her mental health. The post had maybe 3 replies, but one line in her message made my skin crawl. I can't live next to someone who watches me and calls the cops every time I breathe. My stomach twisted. I clicked her profile, dead account, no post since that one. But through cached replies, I found enough to piece things together. She used to live in my house. She'd moved abruptly. No forwarding address. No explanation. And the dates lined up with when the house went on the market for cheap, the same way I'd bought it. I kept digging. Another old thread, this one buried deep, named her landlord. My landlord, the one who sold me the house quickly due to relocation. Something about the phrasing bothered me. Then I found the last thing I expected. A photo, grainy, low-res, probably taken on an old phone, but I recognized the angle instantly. It was my driveway. Same view, same slope, same house. But in the photo, a red Honda sat where my Supra sits now. And on the far left side of the frame on the neighboring porch was a familiar silhouette, standing, leaning, watching. Mark, I clicked again. Another photo, another angle, same silhouette, same posture. It wasn't new behavior. He'd done this before. And based on the timestamps in the forum metadata, he'd been targeting the previous owner for almost a full year before she fled town. A cold heaviness settled into my chest. What had she dealt with? What had she seen? What had he done to her? Why hadn't she reported him? Or had she, and nothing happened? Then I noticed something else in one of the cached comments underneath her goodbye post. He said he'd get me kicked out. He said he could make the city listen to him. My blood ran cold. Noise complaints. Tickets, filing patterns, the exact same tactics he was using on me. This wasn't random. This wasn't personal. This was a system, his system. I kept digging until I hit something that made my whole body go still. A comment from someone claiming to be her cousin. She finally moved after the burglary. Police couldn't prove it was him, but he knew things he shouldn't. Wanted to scare her into selling. Selling. That word hit me like a brick to the chest. Selling. My house had been listed under market value, way under. Almost like someone wanted it emptied fast. And suddenly I saw the pattern clearly. He hounded out the last owner. Now he was trying to drive me out the exact same way, destroying property, filing complaints, sabotaging my life, watching me, controlling me. Control was the point. Control was the obsession. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came when I checked property records, records I'd never bothered looking at before, and discovered that Mark didn't own his house. His brother did. His deceased brother, deceased less than 6 months before I moved in. But the craziest part? The will public record listed my address, my actual address, as the property Mark was supposed to maintain, watch over, and protect. A chill ran straight through my spine. He wasn't obsessed with me. He wasn't obsessed with the previous owner. He was obsessed with my house. And the only thing standing between him and whatever sick claim he thought he had over it was me. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat at my kitchen table, staring at the will printout, trying to understand how someone could twist a piece of paper into a justification for destroying another person's life. The wording was vague: maintain, watch over, and protect the adjacent property until legal transfer is determined. Adjacent property. Not own, not inherit, not control. But I realized something terrifying. Mark had interpreted that line as a command, a responsibility, maybe even a right. While I was reading, something else jumped out at me. His brother hadn't died naturally. Public record listed the cause of death as self-inflicted gunshot wound. And it clicked hard. This wasn't just about a house. This was about loss, obsession, and a mind that had snapped long before I moved in. I spent the next 2 hours digging deeper, and what I learned made my skin crawl. Mark's brother had been the responsible one. He'd owned both properties. He'd been the one who paid the bills, handled maintenance, managed the rentals, and kept Mark afloat. Mark, according to an old article and a few public comments, had bounced from job to job, car repair, security guard, cable installer, but never stuck anywhere. People described him as unsteady, paranoid, territorial. One line from a neighbor interview stood out. He always talked about how everything would fall apart without his brother. His brother died. And everything did fall apart, exactly the way he always feared. The more I read, the clearer it became. Mark wasn't harassing random people. He wasn't even acting out of jealousy or boredom. He was punishing us for taking something he believed was rightfully his. My house. Laura's house before mine. To him, we were intruders. I realized this when I found a scanned photo from years earlier. Both houses under renovation, construction tape everywhere, his brother smiling proudly in the middle of the driveway. The driveway that sits between our two homes. The caption read, "Finally finished the joint project." Joint, shared, linked. In Mark's fractured mind, the two houses were supposed to be part of the same property, his family's property. And when his brother died and the deed wasn't transferred to him, something inside him warped. He started staking claim the only way he knew how, through fear and pressure. Noise complaints, tickets, surveillance, driveway vandalism. Harassing owners until they ran, so he could watch over the house again, like the will instructed. He believed the house wasn't meant to be sold. He believed the city made a mistake. He believed the new tenants were disrespecting a sacred obligation spoken to him in his brother's final words. And he believed he was the only one keeping the neighborhood from falling apart. That line, falling apart, showed up in several documents, in different contexts. It wasn't coincidence. It was a fixation. This wasn't grief. This wasn't coping. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was control sharpened into cruelty. Because underneath it all, I finally understood the real truth, the cold, horrifying root of his obsession. Mark didn't want the house back. He wanted to break the people who lived in it, force them out, make them crawl away. So he could stand over the empty place he believed belonged to him and feel like he'd restored some twisted order in his head. Pain wasn't a side effect for him. Pain was the goal. I wasn't just a neighbor. I was an intruder in his imagined territory, a threat to his dead brother's legacy, a challenge to the last thing he had control over. And the most chilling part, he'd been waiting patiently, methodically, for the moment I snapped. The moment he could prove I was unstable, dangerous, unfit. The moment he could call the city, the cops, anyone and say, "See, I told you." He wanted me to lose control. He wanted me to break. And that's exactly why the revenge I planned had to be silent, smart, and permanent. Because now I finally understood the real enemy, not a bully, not a jealous neighbor, but a man who believed I was stealing the last thing tethering him to sanity. And he was willing to destroy me to protect that lie. Once I understood what Mark really wanted, my fear, my instability, my collapse, I knew exactly how to destroy him. Not by touching him, not by confronting him, not by giving him anything he could twist into proof of me being the problem. He wanted noise, I gave him silence. He wanted chaos, I gave him precision. He wanted me to break. I stayed cold and steady until the day he cracked. It started with the footage. I compiled everything, his stalking, his brick, his surveillance feeds, the cameras installed in my house, the angle showing my sister's driveway, the timestamps confirming it all. I organized it into a clean, chronological packet with summaries, dates, times, file names. No emotion, no commentary, just facts. Then I contacted 3 places: the police, the city code office, and his brother's probate attorney. I didn't call, I didn't show up in person. I emailed everything simultaneously at 9 a.m. on a Monday. The subject line was simple: evidence of ongoing criminal surveillance, harassment, and violation of probate directives. Within an hour, a city investigator called. Within 2 hours, a detective called. By noon, a probate attorney sent a message saying they needed to speak urgently regarding misuse of estate responsibilities. I didn't respond to any of them yet, because there was one last piece of the trap Mark needed to fall into. That night, like clockwork, he came outside and stood on his porch, watching my driveway. The disconnected cameras inside my house were still sitting there where he'd planted them, unchanged. I kept my routines normal. Lights on at the usual time. Curtains at the same angle, everything predictable. I needed him comfortable. Around 1 a.m., he stepped off his porch and wandered toward my driveway, slow, casual, confident. He didn't have a brick this time. He had his phone, the same way he did the night I caught him. He lifted it toward my window like he was checking his live feed. Perfect. He didn't know I'd planted a new camera outside just to catch that exact moment. Him holding the phone, him accessing the illegal feeds, him confirming he still believed he had control. 10 seconds later, he walked back to his house. That was enough. The next morning, I responded to the detective and city investigator. I handed everything over, every file, every screenshot, every minute of footage. I told them I needed to remain anonymous until action was taken. They agreed. The evidence was too strong to ignore. The warrant happened fast. I watched from my kitchen window as 2 unmarked cars pulled up to Mark's house. He opened the door with this annoyed, territorial scowl, like the city was trespassing on his property. But when they asked about surveillance equipment, When they showed him printed screenshots of his own phone screen, when they asked about the cameras in my house and my sister's driveway, his face collapsed. Not angry, not scared. Just broken, like the world he built in his head had finally shattered. They arrested him on the porch. No shouting, no resistance, just a defeated, confused shuffle into the car. The city investigated the complaints and cleared my record. The DMV reinstated my license the same day. The probate attorney contacted me to confirm Mark had been barred from managing anything related to the property ever again. By the end of the week, his house was officially placed under supervised estate control. He wouldn't be returning. The night after everything ended, I stood in my driveway for a long time. The Supra gleamed under the streetlight. The neighborhood was finally quiet. Not the tense, held-breath quiet Mark created, just normal, peaceful quiet. And for the first time in months, I felt safe. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I didn't even speak. I just looked at the empty porch next door. Then I whispered the one line I'd been waiting to say out loud. Looks like I could afford the ticket after all.